Sanjiv, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Good to have you here. You've had such an illustrious career in the financial services industry for the last 30 years, and I have plenty of questions for you about how you got to the top in your corner office, and also about where you're taking the Security Bank to over the next 10 years. But before we get to that, I want to start off with something most people won't know about you, that you almost died, actually, during your college days. You went trekking, I understand, with your friends in Himalayas, and you almost did not make it back. Tell us about that experience.
Sure. It will take a few minutes.
Sure, yeah,
it's a
absolutely.
long story. I'll try and make it as brief as I can. So you're right. As you mentioned, it was an adventure, which actually turned out to be a life-threatening experience, but also a source of strong learning. So I'll view it from both aspects. Actually, in some way, you can also say this is my second life, right? Mm-hmm. I really went through a sort of a near-death experience during the trek itself.
Sure.
So it all started with a group of us friends. We were in the last year of our business school, and we decided to follow the Star Trek theme, to boldly go where no man has gone before. And we planned this trek across Himalayas, and this is from a place called Chamba to Manali. And coincidentally, Manali is an anagram of Manila. Mm-hmm. And as you know, right, coincidences don't happen without a reason. So I believe my affinity with Manila probably started with the trek.
With that, yes.
As well. So it was supposed to be a 5-day trek, but it was off the beaten course. It wasn't a regular trek in the Himalayas. And it was, going across mountains in a province called Himachal Pradesh, which is just south of Kashmir. And we were attempting to go over Kalihani Pass, which is just about, I think, 17,000 feet, which is obviously above snow line. And we, I guess, immature, novice, whatever you call it, we went through this with scant planning, inadequate tools, equipment, and obviously no training. So without really going into too much detail, but suffice to say, as I mentioned, I personally faced a near-death experience where during the trek, and somehow I got isolated and I was alone at that time, I slipped down about 50, 60 feet across a rock face. And fortunately, my sort of feet came to rest on a 2-inch ledge with my face, me facing forward into the river valley, which I could see was like 2,000 feet below me.
Wow.
Anyway, managed to extract myself out of that situation, and then we land right into a cloudburst just a day away from our destination. So we were at the base of the Kalihani Pass, and all we had to do was, we reached there about 5 p.m. in the evening. All we needed to do was go over the pass and into Manali the next day.
Yeah.
Lo and behold, we just finished our dinner, and suddenly there was what we call a whiteout, a cloud burst, and it dumped knee-deep snow in a matter of minutes. It was unbelievable. We have photographs of before and after, and you really can't make out if it's the same, the same place itself. Anyway, we went through quite a lot of hardship during the night. And the next morning, when we all managed to survive that storm, our guide, who we had hired from Chamba, decided to go back. So he said it's definitely not worth the risk going over the pass at this stage. And obviously, we followed his advice because we knew, going over the pass at this stage would be fraught with risk. So we followed him back, but as you may imagine, we had to take the 4-day journey back, but we were only left with 1-day ration, food rations. And that also we could not cook because we were completely wet. I didn't mention earlier when I said no tools, equipment, we went with no tents. We were planning to sleep under the stars. So everything was drenched. Our stoves didn't work. Our matchsticks got drenched. So you couldn't cook anything. So we literally went without food, I would say, for 4 days, walking up and down the mountains. And I truly consider it a miracle that all of us, 12 of us, actually survived that journey. And that day, the day when this happened is etched in our memory, all of us, which was October 9th, 1985.
Amazing.
Strangely, we realized later that it was a freak weather pattern. And there were some students of another college from Delhi University who were in the Spiti Valley. You may have heard of that.
Yes.
So Spiti Valley was across where we were, and they never came back.
Oh my God. And
another trivia, it was reported later, which we again learned after we finally got home, that 5 army mountain climbers who were attempting to climb Mount Everest died in mysterious circumstances around the same time as well.
Yeah.
So
it seems like there was a weather pattern, across the region there.
Across the region.
And this was before the mobile phones, right? So you were basically completely disconnected from the rest of the world. Were people wondering where were you because you didn't show up where you were supposed to be, in day?
I think it was a nightmare for our families because there's no way for us to inform them until we reached Chamba.
Yes.
So by then we called up our college professor who was sort of the organizer of the trek. And through him, they managed to inform all our parents. But you're right, I think there was a stage, and my parents did tell me that they thought we won't come back.
And did you ever feel that this is it? You may not make it back? Were there?
Strangely, not. I think those are the kind of lessons one learned, right? You got to persevere, and the whole concept and the spirit of survival just kicks in.
Yes.
We had a few individuals who got emotional, and they did break down, and then we had to sort of somehow manage to encourage them. We took off their rucksacks, so distributed their load across everybody else. So there were we had a few people who, in fact, there was one guy who said, "Listen, I'm not moving from here. Get me a helicopter."
Wow!
And we had to literally force him to go.
Yeah, I mean, how do you even get the helicopter there, right? You cannot even contact anybody, so it's impossible.
Nobody knows where you are.
You talked about the lessons, Sanjiv, that you learned from that experience. What are some of those lessons? What did you get out of that? I think
the first and foremost is importance of planning, right? I mean, the fact that we went into this head on without really thinking what we were getting into. But I must also say that, sure, you should plan, but it should not curb your natural desire to take risks, right? So that's something I would not advocate at all. But the importance of planning stood out for all of us. The second was always have a plan B, right?
Yes.
Because we didn't really think about a what-if scenario. We had a 7-day ration when we started from Chamba, and by the time we were supposed to hit Manali, we would have been left with 0. And because we had nothing left and we had to walk all the way back, that's what caused us a lot of hardships. So this aspect has helped me a lot in assessing credit risk. So whenever I look at credit risk, I always look at second way out, right? What's your second way out? So that was another important lesson. And last but not the least is never go for shortcuts, right? If we had gone ahead on our own to cross Kalihani Pass and not heeded the advice of our guide, God knows what would have happened. So, I guess in terms of, even though we did not reach our destination, but all of us came back with a strong sense of learning as well. I don't think it dampened our enthusiasm to go on further treks or take other risks. So fortunately, that didn't happen.
You mentioned, you consider this as your second life. A lot of people who go through this experience, Sanjiv, they come out with a very unique perspective on life. They start appreciating things they didn't appreciate before. Was that the case with you as well? I mean, you came out and say, oh my God, life is very fragile. I better pay attention to this or this.
I guess we were a bit too young and a bit too rash at that stage, and we came out of it and we were happy. So the first thing we did was had one big hearty meal. That's all we wanted to see. So I can tell you the number of tandoori chickens that got consumed by the 12 of us. It was a big number.
Yeah, definitely. It must have tasted much better than the uncooked noodles that you've been eating, for a few days before that. Something else, Sanjiv, that people may not know about you, that I find it quite fascinating, is that you actually grew up playing basketball and you represented your college and I believe your state as well. And I find it intriguing because, I grew up in India as well. I don't know many Indians who actually played basketball because cricket is the national sport. How did you get into that sport?
Well, you're sitting across one who did. So I think it was more, I would say, a lack of choice than anything else. Our school, we didn't have any big playground. So to get involved in sports like cricket, hockey, football, you had to go outside, you had to go external. Whereas the school had 2 basketball courts, and that's how one got initiated into basketball. And secondly, my sister, who also was a senior in school, so she was much more senior than I am. She also went on to do quite well. In fact, she was even selected for the trials of the Indian nationals team. So I think those are the 2 factors that led me to basketball.
And now you live in the Philippines where basketball is the national sport again. Are you able to shoot some hoop?
Well, funnily enough, my daughter plays basketball now. So, but unfortunately with the pandemic, most of the sporting activity has now been curtailed. So she represents a school. So we actually have a hoop at home. So we do shoot a few baskets now and then. She has, sometimes she is able to call her friends and play with them as well.
And who is better, she or you?
Well, I just take advantage of my height. Otherwise, she's a much better shooter than I am.
Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about your education. You studied at IIT, Indian Institute of Technology, and those of us in the audience who may not know what that is, I want to just share with them that it's probably the most difficult school to get into for engineering in India.
So I actually enrolled myself in a private coaching classes to, to go through the curriculum because it was quite different from what we had learned in school. So it was quite tough. So those couple of months required a lot of hard work and planning. Because the examination is tough, but the competition is even tougher, right? Because a lot of people apply, as you rightly said.
No, absolutely. It's probably the hardest place to get into, especially if you are aspiring to become an engineering student. So right after engineering, you got a degree from IIT in textile engineering, if I am correct. And you went right after your MBA. What was the driving factor there?
Within Textile Technology, which was my degree that I got in IIT, I started specializing in polymer engineering. Any further education in that field meant I had to go overseas. There was no institution in India who could provide masters in polymers. And I guess at that stage, my parents were not too keen for me to go overseas, and therefore I decided to go to management and landed up with an MBA.
And why finance? I believe your specialization within MBA was finance, or was it a general MBA?
Actually, I took a combination of finance and marketing, just to cover all bases.
Sure.
Because I at that stage, I didn't know where I will land a job.
Sure.
And actually, during our summer training recruitment season, which is after your first year of your MBA program, the rule of our institute was that you accept the first summer training that is offered to you. And in my case, it happened to be Citibank.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing my summer training internship with Citibank, and that's how the banking journey began.
That's amazing. And what was your first job at Citibank after you finished your MBA?
Again, I took a bit of an off-beaten path. In Citibank at that stage, when you're hired, the first couple of years, they take you through operations or financial control, etc. You never ended up in the front line, i.e., you will not become a relationship manager the first year that you joined the bank. But that was during my era, right? Things have definitely changed at this stage. And in my case, after I finished all my interviews, I was asked to come again to meet another gentleman. And this gentleman used to head internal audit. And then he started explaining to me that there is, he has one job to offer, and this is an experiment. They normally do not take someone coming fresh out of college into internal audit because your job is to audit people. So unless you understand what the person is doing, you're not able to audit.
Sure.
But again, he said they're trying out an experiment and they would like to offer this job to me if I'm interested. And then he really threw the gauntlet by telling me that they cover a region, which meant you'll be traveling from India to Sri Lanka, Thailand, Indonesia, because it's a regional team. Yeah. And I think that's what clicked for me. And I said, wow, yeah, I love to travel. So, if I'm getting an opportunity to do that, I didn't even think twice. And I got straight into it. It was tough. Again, as I said, I was trying to learn on the job and audit people at the same time. So the first 6-9 months were extremely tough. But after that, I think it prepared me a lot better for the banking world itself, because in the 2 years I was in audit, it gave me exposure to all aspects of the bank.
Yes.
If I had gone through the regular program, I would have ended up in 1 or 2 either operational jobs or financial control jobs before you are then eligible to move into the front line. So fortunately for me, I had that opportunity to get a wide exposure, but I also got an opportunity to move into the front line, and that's how I got my first job as a relationship manager. And then I ended up doing relationship management for most of my first, I would say, 15, 16 years of my banking career.
Yeah, and you have stayed with the banking industry, throughout your career since then. Did you ever think about leaving that industry, doing something different?
I think it's, in a way, you become a victim of your success, right? So if you're doing well, you're progressing, you're getting the opportunities to grow, you tend to sort of go with the flow. Not to say I didn't have opportunities to look at, though I never came as close to being offered those opportunities, but I was approached for a couple of opportunities.
Something else that our audience would be quite interested to know is, how is it for you to go from having had this really amazing regional leadership positions at Citibank and Deutsche Bank, ABN AMRO, as well as MUFG Group, most recently, to then being a CEO of a local bank? Are there differences? And if so, what are they? And which one do you like the most? I would think, being the CEO, being in the corner office, where the buck stops with you, right?
That's the difference. The buck stops with you. So I think if I pick one big difference is absolutely that, and that I've taken words out of my mouth, because when you're in a regional job, or even if you are a CEO of a regional or a global bank, you have the luxury of referring back to your colleagues in the region, head office, getting them on the phone or flying down there and discussing issues. If you need reinforcements, you can get the reinforcements brought in, and it happened to me many times. Whereas in a local bank, as you rightly said, the buck stops with you, and you have to manage all your stakeholders, employees, board, customers, regulators, communities, etc. And for me, to lead a team of 7,000 people in Security Bank comes with a tremendous sense of responsibility, because you know that they are looking up to you, especially now in the times of crisis. So as a CEO, I believe that you have to walk the talk, and you have to be prepared to lead from the front.
Something else that I would like to cover with you is where you are taking the bank to in the future. Obviously, the world of banking is being disrupted like nothing we have seen before. How do you ensure that Security Bank remains relevant and it thrives over the next decade, given this very disruptive time that we live in?
To succeed, you really need to change your mindset.
Yes.
So rather than focusing on what we can do or what the competition does, what we are now beginning to do is get to know the customers' journeys. Yes. And understanding their pain points. We've already declared our vision. So our goal is to become the most customer-centric bank in the Philippines. And as you can say, in itself is a big statement.
That's right.
So we do recognize that the competitive advantages going forward is no longer confined to having the best products or the sales or even a service differentiation. But I think this is going to come from the capabilities that are aligned with how customers want to interact.
Yes.
How they can interact in a very simple and an accessible way, right? Mm-hmm. So it will be more determined by the client and not so much you. So in order to get to that stage, we have to then influence how we innovate the customer experience, how we manage our own capabilities and our own technology to be aligned with the customer's expectations.